All right, welcome everybody for this week's edition of DV and Lunch and Learn series. I'm Nicole Molinaro, very proud to be the president and CEO for Women's Center and Shelter of Greater Pittsburgh. And we are thrilled to have you all join us today for our third session in this series. Today is called DV and Money. So it's hard to overstate the role that money plays in domestic violence. It's absolutely one of the most potent tools that's used by abusers. It's a lifesaver for those fleeing from abuse, and it often plays an inextricable role in the genesis of abusive behavior itself. Though domestic violence can and does happen to anyone at any socioeconomic level, research indicates that it's more prevalent and often more severe for those with financial insecurity. Because of this, financial issues are front and center in almost all of the work that we do here at Women's Center and Shelter. Today's presenters are two of my favorite people, two amazing staff members who work with our clients on these issues every single day. Joy, if you want to wave, who is our Immediate Needs Coordination Program Manager, and Julia, who is our Rapid Rehousing Coordinator. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into our chat, and our moderator, Kristen, you can wave too, Kristen. We'll pass them along during the Q&A session at the end, unless it's more appropriate for us to answer a particular question in the chat, in which case we will do so, but most of them will be answered at the end. And as always, please note this content could be triggering, so please take care of yourself in any way that you need to do so. So without further ado, Joy and Julia, please take it away.
Thanks, Nicole. Those who experience intimate partner violence have a lot of complex reasons for not leaving their abusive relationships. Not only is it challenging to go from two incomes to one, especially if you have children, but many batterers actively cause financial harm to their partners. Batterers are also aware that they can use finances and money to continue to exert power and control dynamics in their relationship. So we're going to take a look at what some of those examples might include. I should note that in many healthy, non-abusive relationships, finances can be a really heated topic, but that's not what we're talking about here today. We're here to talk about specific examples of abusers choosing power and control behaviors and exerting that over their partner. This is also a topic that we have to acknowledge has historically been controlled by the male partner in heterosexual relationships. Batterers might use this societal dynamic to enforce their abusive behavior. Next slide. Thank you. So some of the examples that people might see if they're experiencing financial abuse, the abuser might prevent you from keeping or having a job. They may harass you at work. We frequently see this where abusive partners will continually call or randomly show up at a job. Survivors worry about, and a lot have been fired because of their abusive partner's behavior. Abusers may not include you in family financial decisions. They may refuse to work or not allow you access to family finances. They may ask you for money or demand sex in exchange for money. This often goes hand in hand with abusers refusing to allow you to hold a job. In doing this, they're making the survivor more dependent on them and ultimately harder to leave the abusive relationship. They may also take your money or demand an account of everything you buy and hold you to an allowance. They may also control or limit your access to finances. Other things that abusive partners might do are to not allow you to talk to others about your money or not allow your name to be on the accounts, even if you pay bills evenly or pay rent or mortgage evenly. They may also force you to put your name on accounts and then destroy your credit. This is another thing that we see very frequently, where abusers will open credit cards and survivors' names, sometimes without their knowledge or consent, and max out those credit charges. If they forge their names, it makes it almost impossible for survivors to go back in and to undo that once they leave the abusive relationship. They may also belittle your financial contribution and say that you're not really contributing as much as they are, and that therefore your say is not equally as great. They may also expect you to behave in a certain way because you make less money than they do and they're the breadwinner. They may also destroy or interfere with your homework. And we're going to talk about scholarships a little bit later. But if a survivor is in school, the abusive partner may really attempt to sabotage their progress, especially if the survivor is going to gain some sort of financial independence that would make them have a higher paying salary from their abuser. So these are some of the examples that we're going to see often with clients who experience financial abuse. And Julie is going to take us a little bit more in depth on different issues as they relate to employment and housing.
Thanks, Joy. So, of course, a lot of the things that Joy mentioned related to financial abuse can absolutely impact a survivor's ability to access employment. So we have some examples listed here. But the first one, if the abuser destroys your credit history, and that is something that the employer looks into when deciding whether or not they're going to hire you, that can be really harmful because not all employers, but some employers do use credit checks to gauge someone's ability to manage their money. So someone looks into their report and sees delinquent balances, missed payments, or anything like that. They may think that an employee who can manage their own finances and has a track record of doing that consistently and well would do the same for their projects at work. Also, if there's legal involvement between you and your abuser, whether it's related to criminal charges or getting a PFA, filing for a divorce, there's always a possibility that those cases can be extended, rescheduled, continued over very long periods of time. So this can make it really difficult for you to even attend interviews or work regularly, particularly if pay time off isn't offered at your workplace. And additionally, abusers can sabotage you in other ways, like by destroying your work clothes or uniform or equipment, which in turn can cause the victim at work to seem unreliable, or if they make you sick to the point where you can't even attend an interview or work in general. Getting to work can also be Getting to work can also be a challenge for victims when the abuser may sabotage your methods of transportation. So if you take the bus, that may look like him stealing your bus pass or cash for bus fare. If you drive and have a car, that can look like him either damaging your car or hiding your keys. And I think that hiding your keys is also a prime example of how psychological abuse can also intersect and absolutely work with financial abuse, because maybe you have a certain place in the house where you put your keys down every day, and one day you go to grab them to go to work and they're not there. So you're looking, you're searching, your abuser tells you you're crazy, you're losing your mind, and it can really get to the point where some victims actually start to believe it if they're told that enough. Also, childcare with an abusive partner can pose some really complex needs, because if, for example, maybe you had an agreement that the abuser would watch the kids on this certain date and time, but then that date and time comes and the abuser either just refuses or says, we didn't agree to that, I don't know what you're talking about. Then once again, the victim is left having to make a choice in this moment that they were not prepared to make. And if your abuser knows where you work, which is extremely likely, it's also likely that he can show up there. So, for example, you're working and therefore not really looking at your phone, checking your messages, and therefore not able to respond to his texts and calls, he might not like that, or he might not even believe that you're at work. So a lot of victims who do work and are able to do so, work may be the only place that they can go, to escape that abuse and to get away from that. And so when an abuser shows up there, that can obviously be very upsetting and disruptive. And, if he sends you things like gifts and flowers, very obviously public displays and very visible acts, where your coworkers, your employers are, likely to see these things, that can also add another layer of distress, because then it's like, how much do you share with your coworkers and employers? What do you say? Now I'm going to go into some housing issues which are inextricably tied to a person's income. So if someone is looking to flee an abusive relationship and move somewhere else, for me, in my mind, I think of it as there being two main avenues. So if someone has low or unstable income and may not have the potential to increase it, maybe they're not able to work, subsidized housing may be the most suitable option for that person at that point in time. So that's when a tenant would pay 30% of their income towards the rent, and the government would pay the rest to the landlord. But I'm going to be talking a little bit more about market rate housing, which is basically just housing that exists out there at whatever rent or price that the landlord can get for the property. So with market rate housing, basically when a landlord runs your credit and background check to see if you're a viable applicant based on their criteria, they commonly look for a good credit history. Some landlords will put a number out there. Sometimes they'll just say, I'm not going to take anyone with less than a 600. Others are a bit more flexible and more vague in what exactly they require. But in any case, if the credit history is less than favorable, they either may not be willing to rent to the client, or they may set additional rental requirements that may not have existed before, like having them pay a double security deposit or having a co-signer. And when landlords and property management companies look at somebody's background, they typically feel hesitant when they see an eviction, multiple evictions maybe, or criminal history, sometimes depending on what the charges may be for. I cannot even count how many clients we've had who have evictions on their record directly related to their abuser not paying their share of the rent, or they themselves not being able to come with rent because they weren't allowed to work or weren't able to work, or even if they've just fled the unit and area entirely for their safety. And just in terms of financial stability, some want to see or even require that the tenant be making 2 to 3 times the monthly rent in their income. So they might also look into their work history, employment status, current income and assets, and ability to pay upfront first and last month's rent, security deposit, or just some combination of those three. And for positive references, when an abuser exercises their power and control to isolate you, that can also absolutely result in you not having a support system or people that you can put down on this application. And so this is something that's really common that a lot of survivors run into, but also at the same time, that's kind of one of the roles, as advocates here can do is, advocate for these clients in these instances, and we can even act as references for them as well.
And as Nicole mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, people who are more disenfranchised can experience financial abuse at higher rates. Some of the clients that we work with who are refugees, immigrants, or limited English speakers have enhanced safety concerns as they work to access necessary services. This also plays out with different financial abuse tactics, which can include preventing you from learning English. This makes it a lot more challenging for survivors to work to gain employment or financial independence from their abuser, forcing you to work illegally if you don't have the proper paperwork in place and putting a lot at risk with that, or threatening to report you to INS or IRS or ICE, taking the money that you planned to send to family members in another state or country. Forcing you to sign papers in English that you don't understand, things like court papers or IRS forms. This is a really challenging thing to undo if survivors sign any of these forms. The courts don't really understand as well of being forced to sign these papers or being misled in signing these papers the way that they would understand an abusive partner holding a gun to somebody's head. So these can be really challenging to undo and to fix as we work to assist survivors in their self-sufficiency journey. And they may also harass you at the only job you can legally work at until you lose that, which also puts your immigration status then at risk. So we've talked about this a little bit, but some of the research from the National Network to End Domestic Violence suggests that 99% of survivors have experienced some sort of financial abuse from their abuser. This is a really prevalent and complex issue. Because it's so prevalent, challenging, complex, we're going to take you on 2 separate client journeys as they work towards self-sufficiency. Just a note that all names and identifying details have been changed to protect confidentiality. And Julia is going to start us off with a story of one of her clients.
So I'm going to be talking about Mary, who is one of my clients in our rapid rehousing program. So Mary first got connected to Women's Center and Shelter through our hotline. She, at the time of the call, and her 6-month-old son had fled from her abuser to a motel, and, not sustainable. They were very quickly running out of money, but she knew that she needed to find a way out. And so she had the community people that she was connected to through her church, and one of her friends from church had, found her number, given it to her, and, through her phone call with the hotline advocate, was able to safety plan, kind of talk through the abuse that she had endured, figure out some options, and shelter was absolutely the number one need for her at that moment. And, after she had done her assessment, we were able to accept her into our shelter. So they were very anxious when they arrived, and like many others who enter our shelter, it took some time for them to adjust and become more comfortable in a community living setting. Mary wanted to work but didn't have a job, a credit history, or any income because she wasn't allowed to work or have a credit card or really do anything except for whatever her abuser would tell her that she was able to do. So she also didn't have a rental history because at the place that she was staying at, it was only his name that was on the lease. So we were thankfully able to enroll her in our rapid rehousing program, which provides housing search services, short-term rental assistance, and case management services to people as a way for them to exit homelessness quickly and remain housed. But before I talk more about her story, I just want to provide some more context about this rapid rehousing program because it is fairly new to Women's Center and Shelter, and it's been a really cool learning experience for me getting to coordinate it. So rapid rehousing is informed by a housing first approach, meaning that it's the idea that people need to have their basic needs met, such as food, shelter, and clothing before they're able to attend to their other needs. They're also important, but maybe not as urgent, if you're thinking about how to prioritize these needs. So other needs include, childcare, increasing their income, finding a job, and learning how to budget. These are things that we absolutely work on with them throughout their time in the program. And rapid rehousing and housing first are relatively recent approaches, and because of that, that is where a lot of money from HUD has been going towards funding this, as opposed to before rapid rehousing was more of the transitional model. So the rapid rehousing program we have at Women's Center is called DV Up, which stands for Domestic Violence Unified Project. It's a collaboration between us and 2 other DV agencies in the county. So the Hope Center and Crisis Center North, with the Hope Center acting as the lead agency of the project. So right now we are in our 2nd year of the program. I believe it started on July 1st, 2019. So with Mary's housing search and kind of the barriers that I had mentioned, her not being able to work and also not having, things on her record that landlords may be looking for, we definitely ran into a lot of roadblocks during the housing search. A lot of landlords were skeptical of her lack of income and credit history, or hesitant at accepting the program or any type of housing assistance program. So it was kind of like everywhere she turned, everywhere I turned, we just were getting denied left and right. And I mean, I could see that her confidence was really starting to diminish. And what was especially concerning to me was that a few weeks into the housing search, she felt that her only option was to return to her abuser. We had a lot of conversations about that, and she also heavily relied on our shelter staff for emotional support and safety planning during this time. And that was a really hard moment for her, but she put her head back up. We kept trying, and soon after, we did end up finding a landlord who was willing to rent to her and take the program. The unit was spacious, for her and her son. It was affordable, accessible to public transportation, and did pass inspection. So we were able to set up a move-in date for her pretty quickly after that. And actually, the day after she moved in, and during the housing search, she knew that finding a house was her number 1 priority, but she was also like, I really want to find a job. So she was kind of doing both at the same time. So coincidentally, the day after that she moved into her unit, she did receive a full-time job offer from a place that she had applied for, and she was able to start working pretty much that week, which I mean, every time we kind of talk, she's just like, wow, this is so unbelievable. Like everything that I had been working for months just kind of happened, you know, all in the span of 2 days. And, you know, that was, I want to say 6 months ago at this point. And so she, you know, at this point is still working. She's definitely able to pay her rent, you know, on her own at this time. And so with the way that the rental payments for rapid rehousing, it's the amount that the participant pays is based on whatever their income is and also the number of months that they've been in the program. So basically it's kind of like a step down approach. You know, over time we would pay less and less and she would be expected to pay more and more. So, you know, during our monthly home visits and weekly check-ins, we would work on budgeting, really taking a look at her finances and, you know, at the beginning talking about the end and where she wanted to see herself in terms of being self-sufficient. So yeah, with the rental assistance, we were able to provide that for her for about 4 or 5 months based on her income. Typically clients can be in the program for up to a year, and typically 6 to 9 months is the goal or like the benchmark that we are aiming to meet, but she did graduate in much less time just based on the amount of income that she was bringing in. So that was obviously really great for her and she was excited to get to that point. We also assisted her with paying utility deposits to get her gas and electric turned on before she could move in. We provided her with some moving groceries as well and some monthly bus passes too. And in addition to the rapid rehousing funding that we were able to use, we also were able to utilize some relocation funding, which comes from PCADV, our state coalition, in order to help her with those moving expenses to, you know, get her furniture in and, you know, really start making her home feel like a home.
Thanks, Julia. I think that new program is just so exciting and wonderful. I really love to hear about all the great work that you guys are doing and all the hard work that Mary did too. I'm really excited to share my story of Kimberly, which is who is a client that I've been working with for a couple of years now. Kimberly was initially connected to Women's Center and Shelter when she filed a PFA against her abusive husband. She was represented by one of our attorneys in the Civil Law Project, who then connected her to the INC program. When Kim left her abuser, she had 3 kids. They were ages 6, 4, and 2 girls, and then the youngest is a boy. So she was very busy. She really had her hands full. Kim's husband refused to allow her to work. So she started off, as many survivors do, in applying for DPW, DHS benefits of food stamps and cash assistance. So when Kim was starting to apply for cash assistance, she did not realize that in doing so, the state and the county automatically open up a child support claim against her abuser. Her abuser became very violent. He threatened to make her life hell if this continued. So we were able to work together to file a waiver form that allowed Kim to still get the cash assistance and the benefits that she needed without potentially putting her in danger and having her abuser use that as an excuse to continue his abusive behavior. And working with Kim, she also mentioned that she was interested in continuing her education. And this is, I think, part of my job that, one of the parts of my job that I'm super passionate about. So we were able to work together to apply for scholarships for her to go to nursing school. So to date, she's received over $27,000 to help her achieve that goal. And that connects her with both scholarships for living expenses and the school expenses of books, tuition, things like that. But then also if she needs help with a parking pass or transportation to get there, or if she's running behind in rent, there's scholarships that we've been able to connect her with in that process to help her achieve that goal. I think she's going to actually graduate debt-free, which great for her. That would be a wonderful thing to have in place. So she's going to be graduating this semester and getting with her bachelor's in nursing. She is looking for a job. She's hoping to go back at one point and obtain her master's degree. And she's just absolutely the happiest that I've ever seen her. It's incredible to see how far she's come in this journey. And really providing scholarships is one of the favorite parts of my job because it really actually connects people to self-sufficiency farther down the line. So if they're able to go to college, get a good paying job, it's absolutely helps them to not need our services for as long and then to be able to continue to provide that. So to date, we've assisted survivors with over $94,000 in scholarships, and she's definitely a big chunk of that total. Okay, and thank you. So Kim and Mary are just two examples of the 7,000 to 8,000 survivors that Women's Center serves every single year. And because every survivor faces such unique challenges, we really wanted to take that time and highlight them. But we also provide individualized services for everybody because no two survivors have the same situation or have the exact same needs. Excuse me. So this is a breakdown of some of the financial resources that we have available specifically through the INC program. And this is for our last fiscal year from July 19 to June 20. As you can see, a lot of the biggest needs that we have are really for those things that keep people's households functional. Utility assistance is a really big one that we're able to help people out with. That's definitely died down in the pandemic because of all of the moratoriums in place, which is absolutely critical. You know, a mom and her kids can't exist without electricity, or they can't exist without water. So those are things that are really important to still have in place. And I think it's also noteworthy to really point out that a lot of these costs are not large expenses, but often a $43 electric bill is too much for a survivor, and that she would be forced into a forced choice of paying that or putting food on her table for her and her kids. We also do a lot of assistance with home safety. So we've done a lot of assistance with buying people security systems that they're able to install. They can check the cameras remotely to ensure that their abusers aren't lurking around their property. We also have several locksmiths that we work with that are able to go in and change the home. We've had some really terrifying examples where abusers have been hiding in homes and waiting for people and have been able to get in. Sometimes we face some difficulty, survivors face difficulties of not being able to get locks back or abusers denying that they have keys. So doing this locksmith change can be really absolutely critical. Transportation is also on here, and we have a partnership with Travelers Aid, but anything outside of that, which is a lot of car repairs or registration, also comes through that expense. Sorry, Jane. Next slide. Okay, thank you. Sorry. So other things that we're able to provide through the INC fund, we do a lot of assistance with court-related expenses, sometimes as little as a $10 or $20 name change fee for survivors who are going through the divorce process but can't afford that, and really to take back their maiden names. It's a very small expense, but it feels absolutely so meaningful and impactful towards them. We also do a lot of assistance with court-mandated custody communication tools that allow survivors to message their abusers, so they can really look at the messages whenever they feel comfortable. They are not forced to continually answer phones and text and to be really berate on that. They can log onto this system, and everybody, like the judges and the attorneys, have access to that too. So it's a lot more challenging to be verbally abusive on that. We also do some assistance with documentation, providing birth certificates so clients can apply for income-based housing, license replacements. Abusers really frequently take, destroy, refuse to return these documents that are so very critical for survivors in going forward with any type of self-sufficiency. And lastly, I'm going to say with the health expenses, a lot of times abusers will remove the survivor from their health insurance plan whenever they leave the relationship, and they'll go to pick up their regularly scheduled prescription for them or their children to find out that they've been removed from that coverage. So we've been able to provide some assistance towards that so that people are able to have the medication that they need.
And we also wanted to present some pandemic-specific, recession-specific context to intimate-partner violence and also specifically financial abuse. So this quote from a study that was done said that large economic downturns can play a major role in the incidence of IPV. Research indicates that recession contributes to increased rates of severity of violence and controlling behaviors within relationships. I think the key word that I want to point out here is contributes. Being in a recession absolutely does not cause violence or controlling behaviors, but we do know that abuse itself is a choice. So, you know, if you're in a relationship that is already, you know, quite controlling in terms of, you know, his behaviors and actions that he's doing to exercise and maintain that power and control over you, it is very possible that, you know, in the times that we're in right now, that can exacerbate it, not necessarily cause it. So, I mean, I think finances in general, even before the pandemic, can definitely be a big stressor for a lot of people personally, and also when shared finances are involved. But we just wanted to present this and just, I guess, you know, bring some attention to the fact that, you know, we're obviously, you know, still in the pandemic, but I think especially in the first few weeks and, you know, the first few months when a lot of things were being mandated to shut down by the state, you know, people's work hours were reduced, businesses were starting to close. That has definitely had an impact on a lot of the people that we work with.
Thanks, Julia. And as you said, the stress does not contribute towards IPV, but it can definitely be a source for exacerbation right now. We have absolutely seen an increased need for accessing help, and we've also seen an increased severity in the cases of IPV. Within the first couple weeks of the pandemic, we were seeing abusers not be arrested for things that they would normally be arrested for, and also a lot higher need for tangible needs in particular that were really kind of swapped up by everybody in the first couple of weeks. Everybody kind of panic bought toilet paper and paper towels. I know we bought a lot of protein powder just in case, but survivors who are living paycheck to paycheck weren't able to do that. So the donations of the essential care packages and providing basic things that a lot of people don't really think about every day of, I need toilet paper, and if I don't have toilet paper, what am I going to do? Being able to provide that to people has been an absolutely critical part to help them get through this pandemic. The ING program in itself, we're a small but mighty program, and we worked with 206 individual clients in July and August. And that number is actually slightly below where we normally would be post-pandemic, but the needs that we're seeing are absolutely higher as far as both tangible needs and emotional safety needs during this time as well. As a whole, Women's Center has really seen a decline in hotline calls within the past. You can kind of see a phase-by-phase breakdown right there. And just to really sum up everything, you know, for people who experience intimate partner violence, being entangled with their abusive partner is just really a complicated way. It's almost too complicated to leave the relationship, especially without a connection to a skilled advocate who is aware of safety planning concerns and can really help that person to navigate every single resource. A lot of other agencies can provide this assistance without the idea of every single thing that a person accesses needs to be thought of with a safety plan, and that no two clients are exactly the same. And we've really seen a lot of people continue to stay in an abusive relationship, particularly women of color, immigrants and refugees, and people who are not college educated or lower income.
All right. Thank you so much, Joy and Julia, for taking us on that journey with your clients and talking to us about the overall importance and varied roles that money plays in relationships that are involving domestic violence. So thank you both so much for a really informative, excellent presentation. We appreciate it so much. We're going to spend the rest of the time today answering questions that you may have about domestic violence and money. But first, I wanted to remind you all that the final session of the DV and the Lunch and Learn series, which is focused on DV and men, will be on October 29th. And that one will talk about the role of men as victim survivors, as people who batter, as well as allies. So we'll be covering men in all of the varied roles. And you can register online at wcspittsburgh.org/DVAM2020, and we'll put that in the chat as well. So it is now my great pleasure to introduce to you our amazing Chief Development Officer, Kristen Brown. Take it away, Kristen.
Thanks, Nicole. And thank you, Julia and Joy, for a great presentation. We didn't get any questions in the chat, but it's not too late. So if you want to put a question in the chat, please do so. You know, I can't believe it's October 22nd, which means people are starting to think about the holidays if they didn't start in, July, because some people are planners. So what does Women's Center and Shelter do during the holidays to assist our clients? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I am the Merry Happy Elf at Women's Center and Shelter. Kind of my claim to fame is how much I love the holiday season. It's just a wonderful, beautiful, magical time of year. And part of that magic truly is being able to assist clients to buy presents for their children so that they have a holiday gift that they can provide. Women's Center and Shelter provides gift cards. So women can go out and buy presents and have that empowering experience of being able to pick things for their child just like anybody else can. Sometimes we're able to provide them with wrapping paper too, so that they can then wrap those gifts. And we're able to distribute, I can't remember how much, but it's a lot of assistance to people, so that they're able to have a wonderful holiday season.
And if I may just add to that, first of all, of course, the only way that we're able to provide those gift cards and other items is because of the generosity of the community, which has been amazing. And we are hoping certainly continues. And also I have to bust on Joy, because Joy, for her first interview with me, literally walked in the door of my office. And after we introduced each other, said, do you know that it's, and I think it was 60 days, maybe, I can't remember.
3 months. Yeah.
How many? Yeah.
3 months.
3 months. She said, do you know that it's 3 months? Christmas is in 3 months from today. And so she is really our merry elf for all winter holidays. And so excited that she's so enthusiastic in her role and in just general appreciation of the holiday spirit and season. So thanks, Joy.
Thanks, Joy, and thanks, Nicole. We actually have a question from the chat. It's from our friend Ashley. Are there resources available for landlords to learn more about how they can assist with housing for our program? So I know that that's something that you both work on, and likely the shelter advocates, but can either one of you speak to that?
I can speak to that for sure. And I guess just to clarify, are you specifically referring to the rapid rehousing program, or just also, if people aren't in the rapid rehousing program and otherwise need housing assistance in other ways? Both? Okay.
Both from Ashley. Yep, okay. Both, please.
Yeah. Think about the best way to answer, just because rapid rehousing, there are a lot of programs, even in Allegheny County, that are rapid rehousing, many different agencies within Allegheny County that are offered. I know that I think the housing navigators who work at the Allegheny Link, they're always happy to kind of explain programs, housing assistance programs to anyone who's really interested in renting, to clients that may not really know necessarily what that can entail, or if there's any mitigation funds or protections that can assist them if property damage or other instances like missed rent were to occur. So I know that the housing navigators have a general email. I think it might just be housing navigators at AlleghenyCounty.us. I think they'd be a great group of people. See people actually, believe it's Regina Mungo and Kaylee Whitaker who operate out of that unit. And additionally, I mean, if someone is interested in renting to, or working with a DV specific rapid rehousing program, I mean, I'm always happy to talk to landlords and kind of explain, what we can offer them and just kind of the ins and outs that they may want to know. But those are kind of the first two things that come to mind.
And Julia, you answered the question beautifully. To add to that and kind of come at it from a different perspective, we've had for years, I'm not even sure how many years at this point, probably 6 or 7 years, worked with landlords who are, we'll say, friendly to serving domestic violence victims. So we know that there are a lot of landlords who, without hesitation, will kick a victim out of housing because there are problems right at the property. And we also know that there's a good
Blaze, please call 304. Blaze, please call 304.
Got to be Blaze just got called to 304. Sorry about that. I thought it was on Do Not Disturb. Anyway, so we also know that there's a good number of landlords who will kind of go out of their way because they understand and they want to help. And so we've worked to nurture that landlord network for many years. And so throughout all of our different programs, we will, if we know that there's a landlord that well serves victims and survivors of domestic violence, we will definitely try to make those connections. And those are folks who have really made an effort to learn about domestic violence, who are there as supports. Many have been victims themselves, and so they really understand and want to help, and it's their way to contribute. So that's just something I wanted to jump in and add. It was a great question, though.
Thanks, Julian. Thanks, Nicole. The next question is just about, domestic violence in the workplace. So what can workplaces do to help survivors and sort of create a culture of safety?
May I jump in with just and we can, Julia and Joy can talk to this as well, but the very first thing I think is that Standing Firm, which is the business case to end partner violence, is a program of Women's Center and Shelter. And Standing Firm works with workplaces to help to establish policies and procedures that can help a victim of domestic violence or help a perpetrator to get help as well. And also they do a lot of the work through training. And in this day and age, of course, we're doing remote training, and they just launched an amazing new module. And so getting in touch with Standing Firm, becoming a member of Standing Firm is a great way as an employer to be able to help in a more systemic manner. And also, always know that our hotline is available 24/7 if there are any situations specifically at your workplace, because we know that there's unfortunately, a lot of domestic violence that gets carried into the workplace. At the extreme, that's seen in some mass shootings that have been domestic violence driven, that have happened at the workplace or in parking lots. But then we also know that when you're a victim or a perpetrator, you can't necessarily just leave that at the door of your workplace. And so you come in with those emotions. And in some cases, we find perpetrators are using work equipment like phones and cars, etc., to stalk or to harass or bother victims. So they're using workplace resources. And so being able to really identify when there's a situation and help and be able to refer, but within a systemic workplace environment where there are policies and procedures in place to be able to safely do so is really critical. And thank you. Kristen just put the housing and homeless information into the chat, and perhaps can put the Standing Firm website as well into the chat. Julie and Julia, though, did you want to talk about anything from a less systemic level?
I would say just to remember that every survivor's needs are different, and that to reach out to our hotline, as Nicole said, but what works for one survivor may not work for another survivor. Again, obtaining a PFA might be a solution for one survivor and part of her safety plan, but might not be applicable or a safe option for another.
Excellent point.
Thank you all. Another question that we get pretty often is, how does Women's Center and Shelter help anyone who is exiting shelter? So what does that process look like? How do we help, and how do survivors stay connected?
I can speak to this. So I was, before I stepped into this role, I was an intern and an advocate in our shelter. So helping people transition out of shelter, even, participants and clients who weren't in programs, definitely something that we work on with quite a few survivors. So and I guess it kind of depends on the type of assistance that's needed and how exactly they're transitioning out. As we've been saying, no two survivors cases are the same. It also, of course, depends on the amount of funding that we have available. For example, we have relocation funding that a survivor is entitled to, a certain amount of money, from that funding source for, I believe it's a period of up to 2 years. So it's kind of, looking at their situation, kind of figuring out where they're at with that and what exactly they need, and, if we have the resources to get them connected with that. So I know with relocation, and we also have another funding source that assists with homelessness diversion called Home for Good. I would say those are kind of the two main funding sources that we tap into whenever someone is needing assistance with transitioning out, or even during someone's shelter stay. So I think some of the most common things are, someone has a security unit that needs help paying, first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit, or some combination of that. That is absolutely something that those funding sources can provide. Also assistance with moving their expenses, moving costs for sure, storage units, and expenses to replace belongings as well. So specifically, I think in that category, what we see most is if someone is needing to replace their birth certificates or, all of their children's title documents, thankfully, and if they've, maxed out on other funding sources that we have available for shelter residents, like discretionary funds, reload's a great way to tap into that. And I know Joy has also been managing some new great funds that we have through the Pittsburgh Foundation, Travelers Aid, and Aspirant. So, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Julie, I didn't mean to cut you off. Zoom meetings are so weird.
I know.
But one of the great parts of the recent Inc. expansion is that we're now able to work with shelter residents after they leave shelter, so that they can continue to stay connected to Women's Center and Shelter services, so that they still have that connection to safety planning, to emotional support.
Thank you, Joy. Sorry, we were having trouble hearing you towards the end, but thank you both. Julia, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so. Yeah, I was actually just, with the Inc. expansion, that was something that I was also just going to mention, in terms of the kind of checklist that we have whenever someone has a plan to exit. If you do the exit planning, you do as much safety planning, as possible with that survivor, connecting them with, as many resources as we can while we're with them, but also letting them know. I mean, I think, even if whether someone's been in shelter for 1 week or 3 weeks, going from that kind of sitting and having that 24/7 support all the time, going from that to, moving out, on your own, which, is the goal, of course, but also for some people, for many people, most people even, can be a really big adjustment. We've talked to a lot of people who are just like, the support is great, and obviously I don't want to live in a shelter forever, but I just don't know what happens, once I leave and I need you. And so at that point, we remind them hotline is there 24 hours a day, and we do that Inc. referral with them, based on whatever their needs are at that time. Just knowing that yes, this is you're stepping into this next chapter of your life, you are exiting our shelter, but this is not the end of your relationship with Women's Center and Shelter. So, and then usually that comforts them, and just they leave knowing that they're not alone in that way.
And just to add a statistic to that, we measure this, and at a year after exit, 70% of our shelter clients are still in touch with one or more services at Women's Center and Shelter, which I think makes us feel really good and really reinforces what Julia just said.
Thank you, and thank you all. Nicole, do you want to wrap us up? That's all the questions I have, and that's, I think, the end of the questions in the chat. So thank you, Julia and Joy and Nicole. Take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joy and Julia. I did want to address what Heather just chatted about. Will there be a program or Q&A about assistance with the legal department or how to navigate any legal court matters that a survivor may face? So actually, our last DV&, series did cover a little bit of that, so you can go back and view that if you'd like. But also, I really, would encourage, if there's a specific situation, to call in and just talk through anything that you need to talk to, because everything is so very tailored. And but if it's not as specific and you're just interested in general, there's definitely information on our website or from the last DV&, series. So hopefully that's helpful. But yes, let's move into the ways to reach out. So speaking of calling in and talking, we of course have quite a few ways to reach out, whether you are in an unsafe relationship or have gotten out of an unsafe relationship and need support, whether you have a friend, a neighbor, a loved one, somebody you go to church with, a coworker that you're just seeing over Zoom and you're concerned about these days. Whatever the case is, you can call into our hotline and really get some support. And if you need safety planning, information, referral, etc. So you see our phone number up there. We have our new text and chat, which we just launched on May 4th. So you see the text number, our online chat, and then of course we always have our Are You Safe app, which has a danger assessment as well as ways to connect and all sorts of information, whether you are the victim or you're seeking help for a loved one or family or friend. So we do encourage everybody to reach out to us. And because it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month now and always, we ask you to show your support. There's 5 easy ways to show support specifically during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. The first is doing what you're doing right now, really getting educated and learning. And there's lots of ways beyond our DV&, series to be able to do that. And we also, if you like our Facebook page, that's awesome. We also ask that you can share our posts. We've been really trying to do a lot of information sharing through our posts and education as well. So please like and share us on Facebook and Instagram. Of course, make a donation at WC&ScanHelp.org is always very high up on our list. We literally don't know what we would do without the community supporting us. About a third of our budget is from individuals and corporations and foundations, and without it, we would not be able to offer the level of services that we do to the number of people that we do. And we mentioned as well the Adopt a Family program. That's a program that literally wouldn't exist without community support, so we would encourage you to donate gift cards to the Adopt a Family program. And then another really fun way to support Women's Center and Shelter is to compete in our Trivia or Treat virtual trivia night coming up next week, as a matter of fact. And it's only $10 and proves to be really fun, hosted by Trivia Master Ben Banyas. And we should all just get together and have a really fun time. And then, of course, donating a meal or items from our wish list for our shelter is really a great way to help. Typically in COVID times, of course, it's restaurant prepared, and we can work with you on the number of people and how to get everything in and safely, etc. So, and our essential needs list is always updated on the web list. So we really ask for you to strive for 5 during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Still plenty of time left in the month to do so. And we so appreciate everything that everybody has been doing so far for DV Awareness Month, whether it's wearing purple, whether it is doing anything from the list. Your support really just helps us to do what we do, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you all so much for coming today, and thank you for all you do, and have a great rest of the day, everybody. See ya.